A suspicious iPad message, expensive jewelry my daughter couldn't afford, a secret date night, and a box of evidence in a storage unit led to me teaming up with a detective and secure justice. The most wholesome Uno reverse a father could plan. I was fast asleep at 3 a.m. when I woke up to the sound of my 15-year-old daughter giggling alone in her room. My mind immediately thought of boys, but I didn't want to jump to conclusions. So the next morning, I asked who she was on call with last night. "No one," she blurted. Her face went completely red, like she was angry at me for even just asking. That's when I knew she was hiding something. Over the next few weeks, she spent every weekend at her friend's house. But whenever I texted offering to pick her up, she would either decline or just not answer. And there were cracks in her stories. For example, she'd tell me she was going to Stacy's house. Then when she came home and I asked how it went, she'd say she had a great time with Sarah, and maybe in other circumstances this would be okay. But she was in an all-girls school with only 2 friends, and I was best friends with the moms of these 2 friends, so it just didn't seem plausible. So from there, I started paying a little more attention. I could tell by the way she smiled in the evening whether or not she had told me the truth about where she had been. But then things took a turn. She was coming home with expensive gifts that no one in our neighborhood could have afforded to buy, and had started asking me if I would be okay with her moving out at 16. I tried everything to get her to talk. We spent more evenings together. I'd make up stories about other children and how I'd be okay if she ever did the same thing, how I loved her no matter what. But nothing worked. She'd just say, "I know, Dad," before going on her phone and ignoring me. But then came the night that changed everything. I was using the family iPad when I saw a chat had been deleted on iMessage. The profile picture was of a man who could have been 60. He was sending her kissy face emojis about how proud he was of his baby girl and how he couldn't wait to see her again. When my daughter Ava got home an hour later, I didn't waste any time. I showed her the texts and asked who Mike was. I kept my tone neutral, not wanting her to feel like I was angry at her. "You don't know what you're talking about," was the only thing she said, while she tried to stomp up to her room. I stopped her on the stairwell. "Ava, you know I love you, but I had to know these things. Is he your boyfriend? Have you guys kissed? What's going on?" She demanded that I give her privacy and ran into her room before locking the door. I buried my face in my hands. Was it too late? Had I failed at being a father? That night I called in sick to work, because the next morning, as soon as Ava left for school, I did something I'll never forgive myself for. I walked over to the sheriff's department as soon as they opened. I brought the iPad and showed them all the texts. I wasn't too good with technology, but they didn't have that problem. They discovered dozens of comments he had left under my daughter's Instagram pictures, with one even saying how mature and beautiful she looked. And from digging deeper into the cloud, they found that Ava had been calling him almost every night. He'd even sent her almost $400 to her checking account under an alias name. I could see the officer's face turning more and more contorted, and by the time he was finished, he was just as angry as me. He told me they had his location, and he was going to drive there. He even let me come with him. When we got there, my daughter was sitting right beside him. The cops wasted no time in arresting him and driving him to the station. "Dad, what are you doing?" my daughter yelled, but I ignored her, or tried to at least, because that's when she screamed even louder. "Dad, this is an anxiety support group." I looked around and saw a bunch of girls that were Ava's age sitting in chairs. "Mike is the leader, Dad." I froze. She had never even told me she was struggling. I promised to clear things up with the officer, but when I told him what was really going on, he didn't believe me. "It might seem that way, sir, but those Instagram comments told me otherwise." It's like he was dead set on arresting him for no reason. And I guess word spread fast because Ava became the topic of conversation in her high school and the neighborhood as a whole. She was spending all her spare time locked in her bedroom, barely eating. She told me I had ruined her and Mike's reputation. Well, summer was coming up, and I can work remotely. So I tried to console her with the idea of moving across the state. She agreed, but it only made things worse. She refused to go to another support group, and I was forced to watch as my baby girl got skinnier and more isolated every single day. I never thought I could hate myself so much just from jumping to conclusions. But one day, out of nowhere, she woke up completely cheery again, even more so than her old self, to the point where I was worried. But I learned from last time and decided to go through her phone while she slept. That's when my jaw dropped. She was in contact with Mike again. He had gotten a new number and was sending selfies he had taken of them kissing. Turns out, the entire time, they really had been flirting with each other. My hands shook as I stared at the screen. The photos kept loading, one after another. Mike's arm around her waist, her head on his chest, a kiss on her forehead that made my stomach turn. I set the phone down carefully on her nightstand, exactly where I'd found it. My mind raced through every interaction, every lie, every moment I'd missed. The anxiety support group had been real, but it was also their cover story, a perfect excuse for weekly meetings that no parent would question. I walked to the kitchen and gripped the counter until my knuckles went white. The clock read 4:47 a.m. Ava would wake up in 2 hours for school. What was I supposed to do? Call the police again? They'd already arrested him once based on my accusations, only to release him when it turned out to be a support group. Would they even believe me this time? I made coffee with trembling hands, spilling grounds across the counter. The bitter smell filled the kitchen as I tried to think clearly. Mike was in his 60s. My daughter was 15. The math was simple, but the solution wasn't. By the time Ava came downstairs at 7 a.m., I'd cleaned the kitchen 3 times and hammered half a pot of coffee. She bounced into the room with that same unsettling cheerfulness, humming sighing under her breath. Morning, Dad. She grabbed an apple from the bowl on the counter. I'm meeting Sarah after school to study for finals. That okay? Sarah, one of her two actual friends, or was that another lie? I nodded, not trusting my voice. She paused at the doorway, backpack slung over one shoulder. You okay? You look tired. Just couldn't sleep, I managed. Maybe try some of that meditation app I showed you. She smiled, and for a moment, I saw my little girl again, the one who used to fall asleep on my shoulder during movie nights. Then she was gone, the front door clicking shut behind her. I called in sick to work again. My boss was starting to ask questions, but I couldn't focus on spreadsheets and meetings when my daughter was involved with a predator. I spent the morning pacing the house, picking up my phone a dozen times only to set it down again. Finally, I called the one person I could trust. Benji had been my best friend since college, and more importantly, he was a lawyer. I need your help, I said when he answered. It's about Ava. An hour later, we sat in his home office surrounded by law books and framed degrees. I showed him everything: the deleted messages, the Instagram comments, the money transfers, and now the photos. His expression grew darker with each piece of evidence. This is serious, he said, setting down the phone. But we need to be careful. The previous arrest complicates things. If we go to the police again without solid proof of illegal activity, they might dismiss it as a father overreacting. She's 15, Benji. He's 60. I know, but from what you've shown me, the photos are just kissing. Inappropriate? Absolutely. Illegal? That's harder to prove. We need something more concrete. I wanted to throw something. So what do I do? Just let this continue? No. He leaned back in his chair, thinking. We document everything. Every interaction. Every lie. Every gift. Build a case that's undeniable. And in the meantime, you need to find out more about this Mike. Real last name, address, employment history. Everything. I left Benji's office with a plan, but my stomach still churned with anxiety. When I got home, I started with Ava's room. I hated myself for invading her privacy again, but I needed answers. The hidden box was under her bed, pushed far back against the wall. Inside, I found the receipts I'd discovered before, but there was more. A birthday card signed, Love Always M, with a $200 gift card tucked inside. A necklace that looked expensive, and at the bottom, a small notebook. I opened it with shaking hands. Ava's handwriting filled the pages. Dates, times, locations. It was a record of their meetings. The first entry was from 6 months ago, right around when she'd started acting strange. First session today. Mike says I'm special, that I understand things other kids my age don't. He makes me feel seen. I flipped through more pages, watching the entries change from innocent observations to something that made my skin crawl. Mike says our connection is unique, that people wouldn't understand. He's probably right. Dad would freak out if he knew how much Mike cares about me. The notebook went back under the bed exactly where I'd found it. I photographed every page first, building the documentation Benji had suggested. That afternoon, I drove to the community center where the support group had been held. The receptionist recognized me from the day of the arrest. I'm so sorry about that misunderstanding, I said, trying to sound casual. I was wondering if you could tell me more about Mike. My daughter really valued his help, and I wanted to thank him properly. She shifted uncomfortably. Mike doesn't run groups here anymore. After the incident, the board decided it was best if he stepped down. Oh, I had no idea. Do you know where he might be holding sessions now? I really couldn't say. She turned back to her computer, clearly ending the conversation. I sat in my car afterward, adding this information to my growing file. Mike had lost his position because of my actions, but instead of staying away from Ava, he'd found a way to pull her closer. When Ava came home that evening, she was still riding that artificial high. She chatted about school and friends like nothing was wrong, but I caught her checking her phone every few minutes, smiling at the screen. How was studying with Sarah? I asked during dinner. Great. We're totally ready for the history final. She took another bite of pasta. Oh, and her mom says hi. I'd already texted Sarah's mom. Ava hadn't been there. After dinner, I helped with dishes while Ava did homework at the kitchen table, or pretended to. I could see her texting behind her textbook. Every giggle, every smile felt like a knife twisting in my chest. Dad? She looked up suddenly. I was thinking about getting a job this summer. You know, save up some money for college. That sounds responsible. What kind of job? There's this tutoring program for younger kids. It pays really well, and the hours are flexible. I kept my voice steady. Who runs the program? Just this educational nonprofit. They do background checks and everything, so you don't need to worry. She smiled that too bright smile again. Another lie. Another cover story. I wondered if Mike was coaching her on what to say. That night, I couldn't sleep again. I sat at my laptop, searching for any information about Mike. The support group's old website listed him as Mike Nicholas, peer counselor. But deeper searches revealed nothing. No social media, no professional history, no address. It was like he'd appeared out of nowhere. At 2 a.m., I heard Ava's door creak open. Footsteps padded down the hall to the bathroom. I waited, listening. The toilet flushed, water ran, and then silence. She hadn't gone back to her room. I crept to my door and peered out. Her room was dark, but I could see light coming from under the bathroom door. Muffled voices. She was on the phone. I know. I miss you too, I heard her whisper. Just a few more weeks, and then summer. Yeah, my dad won't suspect anything if I say I'm working. I pressed my back against the wall, fighting the urge to burst in and grab the phone. But Benji was right. I needed to be smarter this time. The next few days fell into a horrible pattern. Ava lied. I documented. She snuck phone calls. I recorded dates and times. She came home with new jewelry. I photographed everything. Ben from work started asking if everything was okay. You've been out a lot lately, he said during a video call. If you need to take some personal time, I might, I admitted. Family stuff. He nodded sympathetically. Take care of yourself, man. The quarterly reports can wait. But I couldn't take care of myself when my daughter was in danger. I was surviving on coffee and determination, spending every free moment building the case against Mike. Then came Thursday. Ava announced she was sleeping over at Stacy's house on Friday night. Her mom already said yes, she added quickly. I nodded, playing along. But when Friday came, I was ready. I dropped her off at Stacy's house at 6 p.m., waving to Stacy's mom through the window. Then I parked around the corner and waited. Sure enough, at 6:47, Ava slipped out the back door and walked 3 blocks to where a gray sedan was waiting. Mike. I followed at a distance as they drove across town. They pulled into a small Italian restaurant, the kind with checkered tablecloths and candles on every table. I parked where I could see them through the window and started recording on my phone. They sat close together, Mike's hand covering hers on the table. He fed her bites of his dessert. She laughed at his jokes, looking at him with adoration that made me sick. When he leaned over to whisper in her ear, she blushed and giggled. This wasn't a support group. This wasn't mentoring. This was a date. I sat there for 20 minutes, watching them through the restaurant window, my phone recording everything. When they finally got up to leave, I ducked down in my seat. They walked out holding hands, Mike opening the car door for her like she was his girlfriend, not a child he was manipulating. I followed them to a small park where they sat on a bench overlooking the pond. The way she leaned into him, the way he stroked her hair, it took everything in me not to run over and pull her away. But I needed more evidence. Benji had been clear about that. When Mike finally dropped her back at Stacy's house at 9:30, I was already parked in my original spot. 10 minutes later, I knocked on Stacy's door. Oh, hi. Stacy's mom looked surprised. I thought Ava was staying the night. Change of plans, I said, keeping my voice light. Early morning tomorrow. Ava appeared behind her, face flushed. Dad, I told you I was staying over. I know, sweetie, but we have that thing tomorrow morning. Remember? She glared at me, but grabbed her overnight bag. The ride home was silent, except for her angry breathing. The next morning, I decided to try a different approach. I made her favorite breakfast, blueberry pancakes with whipped cream. She came downstairs suspicious, but hungry. We need to talk, I said, setting the plate in front of her. If this is about last night, it's not. I sat across from her. Ava, I know things have been hard since the move. I know you miss your old friends, your old life, and I know I haven't been the easiest dad to talk to. She poked at her pancakes, not meeting my eyes. I want you to know that whatever's going on, whatever you're dealing with, I'm here. No judgment, no anger, just here. For a moment, I thought I'd gotten through. Her eyes filled with tears. Then her phone buzzed, and the moment shattered. She glanced at the screen, and her whole demeanor changed. Thanks for breakfast, she said, already standing. I'm meeting Sarah at the library. After she left, I went through her room again. This time, I found something new. A receipt from a small motel on the edge of town. My hands shook as I photographed it. The date was from 2 weeks ago, during one of her supposed sleepovers. I drove to the motel that afternoon. The clerk was a bored-looking woman in her 50s who barely glanced up from her magazine. I'm looking for my daughter, I said, showing her Ava's photo. She might have been here 2 weeks ago with an older man. She shrugged. We get a lot of people. Can't remember everyone. I slid a 50 across the counter. Her memory improved remarkably. Yeah, I remember them. He said she was his granddaughter. Paid cash. They were only here for a few hours. My stomach churned. I thanked her and left, adding this to my growing file of evidence. That evening, Ava came home with a new story. Dad, there's this amazing summer program for gifted students. It's a bit expensive, but it would look great on college applications. How expensive? $2,000. But Mr. Nicholas from the support group, he knows the director. He said he could get me a discount. There it was. Mike's name, spoken casually like he was just another adult in her life. I kept my expression neutral. Let me think about it, I said. Can you get me some information about the program? She beamed. Of course. I'll ask Mike, Mr. Nicholas, tomorrow. That night, I called Benji again. He's escalating, I said, explaining about the motel and the fake summer program. I need to do something. We're building a case, Benji reminded me, but we need to be patient. One wrong move and he could convince her to run away with him. The thought made my blood run cold, but he was right. I'd already seen how my impulsive actions had backfired. Over the next few days, I watched Ava become more brazen with her lies. She'd leave for school in one outfit and come home in another. Clothes I'd never seen before, more mature than anything in her closet. She started wearing makeup, subtle but noticeable, and always, that phone in her hand. I tried following her again, but she'd gotten smarter. She'd take complicated routes, double back, duck into stores. Once, I'm sure she spotted my car because she suddenly changed direction and went straight home. Then came the confrontation I'd been dreading. Wednesday morning, Ava came downstairs with a determined look on her face. Dad, we need to talk about boundaries, she said, arms crossed. I know you've been following me. I set down my coffee carefully. Ava, no, let me finish. I'm 15, not 5. I deserve privacy. I deserve trust. And if you can't give me that, then maybe I should go live with Mom. Her mom, my ex-wife who lived 3 states away and hadn't seen Ava in 2 years. It was an empty threat, but it still stung. You're right, I said, surprising her. I have been following you because I'm worried about you, because you've been lying to me. I haven't, Ava. I kept my voice gentle. I know you weren't at Sarah's on Friday. I know you weren't at the library yesterday. And I know you've been seeing Mike. Her face went pale, then red. You went through my room. I did, and I'm not proud of it. But I'm your father, and it's my job to keep you safe. Safe from what? From having friends? From having a life? She was crying now, angry tears streaming down her face. Mike is the only person who understands me. He listens to me. He doesn't treat me like a child because he wants something from you, Ava. Adult men don't form friendships with teenage girls without wanting something. You don't know him. You don't know anything. She stormed upstairs, slamming her door so hard the house shook. I sat at the kitchen table, head in my hands. Every conversation pushed her further away, closer to him. That afternoon, while Ava was at school, I got a call from an unknown number. My heart raced as I answered. Mr. Patterson? The voice was smooth, cultured. I recognized it from the videos I'd seen. Mike, I think it's time we talked man to man. How did you get this number? That's not important. What's important is Ava. She's very upset about your behavior. I'm concerned it's affecting her mental health. The audacity of this man. Stay away from my daughter. I'm her counselor, Mr. Patterson. She needs support during this difficult time. Perhaps if you understood the nature of our therapeutic relationship. There's nothing therapeutic about taking a 15-year-old to motels. Silence. Then, I don't know what you think you know, but making false accusations seems to be a pattern with you. First the arrest, now this. Ava told me about your paranoid delusions. Perhaps you're the one who needs counseling. He hung up before I could respond. I stared at the phone, realizing he was already working to discredit me, to paint me as the unstable one. When Ava came home, she went straight to her room without a word. I heard her on the phone, voice muffled but clearly upset. An hour later, she emerged with a packed bag. Where are you going? I asked, though I already knew. Stacy's, and this time I'm actually going there. Her mom said I could stay as long as I need to. She looked at me with such disappointment. I can't be in this house with you right now. I wanted to stop her, but what could I do? Physically restrain her? That would only prove Mike's point about my instability. So I let her go, watching from the window as Stacy's mom picked her up. That night, I couldn't sit still. I drove past Stacy's house 3 times, making sure Ava was really there. She was. I could see her through the living room window, watching TV with Stacy. But the next morning, Stacy's mom called. I just wanted to check. Is it okay that Ava goes to her counseling appointment? She said you knew about it. My heart sank. What time? She said Mike is picking her up at 10. I thanked her and hung up, then immediately called Benji. He's picking her up from Stacy's. What do I do? Follow them. Document everything. But don't intervene unless you absolutely have to. So I waited down the street from Stacy's house, watching. At exactly 10, the gray sedan pulled up. Ava practically ran to the car. I followed at a distance as they drove not to any community center or office building, but to a small house in a quiet neighborhood, Mike's house. I parked where I could see the front door and settled in to wait. An hour passed. 2. My phone rang. Work again. I let it go to voicemail. Finally, after 3 hours, the front door opened. Ava emerged first, looking flushed and happy. Mike followed, his hand on her lower back in a way that made me want to vomit. They stood by his car talking, and then he pulled her into a hug that lasted far too long. I took photos of everything, my hands shaking with rage and fear. When Mike dropped her back at Stacy's, I was already there, waiting in the driveway. Ava's face fell when she saw me. Get in the car, I said. Dad, now. She got in, slamming the door. As I pulled away, I saw Mike watching from down the street. We're going home, I said, and you're going to tell me everything. There's nothing to tell. We talked. He helped me process my feelings about you being controlling and paranoid. For 3 hours? Therapy takes time, Dad. Not that you'd understand. At home, I laid out all the evidence I'd collected. The photos, the receipts, the documentation of their meetings. Ava looked at it all with a mixture of shock and anger. You've been stalking us, she said. This is insane. This is a 60-year-old man grooming my teenage daughter. He's not grooming me. God, why does everything have to be sick and twisted with you? Maybe some people just care about me. Ava, please, look at this objectively. The secret meetings, the gifts, the lies he's telling you to tell. I'm done with this conversation. She stood up, gathering her things. And I'm done with you trying to control my life. She headed for the door, but I moved to block her. You're not leaving. You can't keep me prisoner. I'm your father. I can absolutely keep you from running to a predator. She laughed, bitter and cold. You think you're protecting me? You're suffocating me. And the second I turn 18, I'm gone. Mike said he'd help me file for emancipation if necessary. The words hit like a physical blow. Mike was already planting seeds, preparing for the long game. That night, I installed new locks on the doors, the kind that needed a key from both sides. I knew it was extreme, but I was running out of options. Ava screamed at me, called me a jailer, a psycho, said she hated me. Each word cut deep, but not as deep as the thought of losing her to Mike. The next morning, she refused to come out of her room. I brought her breakfast, lunch, dinner, all untouched. By evening, I was starting to panic. I knocked on her door. Ava, please, you need to eat something. I'll eat when you give me my freedom back. I slept fitfully, waking every hour to check that she was still there. At 3 a.m., I heard a crash. I ran to her room to find the window broken. Ava halfway out. Ava, no! I grabbed her arm, pulling her back inside. She fought me, screaming, let me go! I hate you! I hate you! I held her while she sobbed and raged, my own tears falling. My baby girl, so lost and confused, so thoroughly under his spell. When she finally calmed down, I cleaned up the glass and boarded up the window. She watched me with dead eyes. This won't stop me, she said quietly. I'll find a way to be with him. Why? I asked, desperate. Help me understand. What does he give you that I can't? She was quiet for a long moment. He sees me as a person, not just your daughter. He treats me like I matter. You matter to me more than anything in the world. No, she said. I'm just something for you to control, to keep safe in a box. Mike understands that I'm more than that. I wanted to shake her, to make her see how twisted Mike's understanding was. But I could see in her eyes that nothing I said would get through. Mike had done his work too well. The next few days were a nightmare. Ava refused to speak to me, refused to eat unless I left the food outside her door. I called in sick to work again, knowing my job was probably on the line, but unable to care about anything except my daughter. Then, on day 3 of our standoff, everything changed. I was dozing on the couch when I heard Ava's door open. She came downstairs, pale and shaky. "Dad?" Her voice was small. "I think I need help." I jumped up, rushing to her. "What's wrong? Are you sick?" She held out her phone with trembling hands. On the screen was a message from Mike. "If you don't come back to me, I'll share our special photos with everyone at your school." My blood turned to ice. "What photos?" Ava collapsed into my arms, sobbing. "I'm sorry, Dad. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean for it to go so far." I held her as she shook, her tears soaking through my shirt. The phone slipped from her hand and clattered to the floor. I didn't need to see the photos to understand what had happened. My stomach churned with rage and fear. "It's okay," I whispered, even though nothing about this was okay. "We're going to fix this." She pulled back, eyes red and swollen. "You can't fix this, Dad. If those photos get out, they won't." I picked up her phone, screenshotting Mike's threat before she could stop me. "This is evidence, Ava. He just made a huge mistake." The next morning, I told her we needed to talk. She sat at the kitchen table, picking at her fingernails while I made us both tea. Her hands trembled as she wrapped them around the warm mug. "I need you to tell me everything," I said gently. "From the beginning." She stared into her tea for a long moment. Then the words came tumbling out. How Mike had made her feel special at first, like she was mature beyond her years. How he'd gradually pushed boundaries, always making it seem like her idea. The gifts, the secret meetings, the way he'd convinced her that their relationship was something beautiful that others wouldn't understand. "When did the photos happen?" I asked, keeping my voice steady despite the fury building inside me. "Last month, at the motel." Her voice was barely a whisper. "He said they were just for us, that they showed how much we trusted each other." I wanted to put my fist through the wall. Instead, I reached across the table and took her hand. "None of this is your fault. He's an adult who manipulated you. You're the victim here." She started crying again. "I feel so stupid." "You're not stupid. You're 15. He's the one who's wrong here." That afternoon, while Ava rested upstairs, I went through her room one more time. This time, I wasn't looking for evidence of their relationship. I was looking for anything that might tell me where else those photos might be stored. I found a receipt for a small storage unit across town, paid for 3 months in advance. The name on the receipt was M. Nicholas. I called Benji immediately. "He's threatening to release photos of her, and I think I know where he might be keeping copies." "Don't do anything rash," Benji warned. "We need to handle this legally." But I was done being patient. My daughter was being blackmailed by a predator. I drove to the storage facility and convinced the manager I'd lost my key to Unit 47. $20 later, he cut the lock for me. Inside, I found exactly what I'd feared: a laptop, external hard drives, and printed photos in manila envelopes. Not just of Ava, but of other girls too. My hands shook as I gathered everything into a box. This was bigger than just my daughter. I drove straight to the sheriff's department. This time I asked for a different officer, a woman named Detective Martinez, who specialized in crimes against children. She took one look at what I'd brought, and her face hardened. "We'll need to verify the chain of custody on these items," she said. "But if what you're telling me is true, we're looking at multiple felonies. He's threatening to release photos of my daughter if she doesn't go back to him," I said, showing her the screenshot. "That's extortion on top of everything else." She picked up her phone. "I'm going to need you to bring Ava in for a formal statement, and we'll need her phone." The next few hours were a blur. Ava was brave, telling the detective everything while I sat beside her, holding her hand when she needed it. Detective Martinez was gentle but thorough, asking questions that made my skin crawl but were necessary for the investigation. By evening, they had enough for an arrest warrant. Mike was picked up at his house, where they found more evidence on his computers. The detective called to update us. "He had files on at least 6 other girls," she said. "You did the right thing coming forward." But the arrest was just the beginning. Over the next few days, our house became a revolving door of investigators, counselors, and lawyers. Ava had good days and bad days. Sometimes she'd blame herself, other times she'd blame me for not protecting her better. I found her a real therapist, Dr. Kim, who specialized in helping teens who'd been groomed. One evening, about a week after Mike's arrest, I found Ava in the kitchen making dinner. It was the first time she'd cooked since everything came out. "Spaghetti okay?" she asked, not quite meeting my eyes. "Perfect," I said, sitting at the counter to watch her work. We ate in comfortable silence for a while. Then she set down her fork and looked at me. "I'm sorry I said all those things about hating you and wanting to live with Mom. You don't need to apologize. You were being manipulated. But I was so mean to you, and you were just trying to protect me." Her eyes filled with tears again. "I actually told him things about you, Dad. Personal things. He used them to make me think you were the enemy." I walked around the table and pulled her into a hug. "That's what predators do. They isolate their victims, turn them against the people who love them most. But we're going to get through this together." The next few weeks were challenging. Word got out at school despite our efforts to keep things quiet. Some kids were supportive, others whispered behind Ava's back. I offered again to move, to start fresh somewhere new. "No," she said firmly. "I'm not running away. I didn't do anything wrong." I was so proud of her strength. She threw herself into therapy, working hard to understand how she'd been manipulated and how to protect herself in the future. Dr. Kim included me in some sessions, helping us rebuild our trust and communication. One afternoon, Detective Martinez called with an update. 2 more families had come forward after hearing about Mike's arrest. One mother broke down crying, saying she'd noticed changes in her daughter but hadn't known what to do. "Your evidence was crucial," the detective told me. "Without those storage unit files, we might not have found the other victims." The preliminary hearing was set for 3 months later. Ava would have to testify, but the prosecutor assured us they'd make it as easy as possible for her. In the meantime, Mike was being held without bail. The judge considered him a flight risk and a danger to the community. I finally had to deal with work. My boss was understanding when when I explained the situation in vague terms. Family emergency involving my daughter. He gave me extended leave and told me my job would be waiting when I was ready. Ava slowly started to heal. She began eating normally again, even gained back some of the weight she'd lost. She reconnected with her real friends, Stacy and the actual Sarah, who'd been worried about her but hadn't known how to help. One night, she came to me with her laptop. "I want to show you something," she said, sitting beside me on the couch. She'd written a letter to the other girls Mike had targeted, not to send, just to process her feelings. In it, she talked about how alone she'd felt, how special he'd made her feel at first, and how that specialness had turned into a trap. She wrote about the shame and confusion, but also about hope and healing. "Dr. Kim says writing helps," she explained. "Maybe someday I'll share it with them. Let them know they're not alone either." 3 months passed quicker than expected. The night before the preliminary hearing, Ava couldn't sleep. I found her in the kitchen at 2 a.m., making hot chocolate. "Scared?" I asked, joining her at the table. "Terrified," she admitted. "What if they don't believe me?" "They will. You're telling the truth, and the evidence supports everything you've said. What if he looks at me? Then you look right back. Show him he doesn't have power over you anymore." The hearing was rough. Mike's lawyer tried to paint the relationship as consensual, suggesting Ava had pursued him, but the prosecutor shut that down quickly, presenting the evidence of grooming, the photos, the threats. When Ava testified, she was clear and strong, even when Mike tried to catch her eye. The judge bound the case over for trial. As we left the courthouse, Ava squeezed my hand. "I did it," she whispered. "You did amazing," I told her. 6 months later, Mike took a plea deal. 9 years in prison, lifetime registration as an intimacy offender, no contact with minors. It wasn't enough in my opinion, but the prosecutor explained it meant Ava and the other girls wouldn't have to go through a full trial. The day the sentence was announced, Ava asked if we could go to the beach. We drove 2 hours to the coast, walked along the sand as the sun set. She was different now, more cautious, but also stronger, more aware of her own worth. "I've been thinking," she said, stopping to pick up a shell. "Maybe I want to be a counselor someday, help kids like me. I think you'd be amazing at that," I said. She smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes for the first time in almost a year. "Dr. Kim says I have to heal myself first. But someday, yeah, I want to help people understand they're not alone." We stood there watching the waves, father and daughter, survivors of something that had nearly torn us apart. The road ahead was still long, but we were walking it together. That night, as I tucked her in, something she'd started letting me do again, she grabbed my hand. "Thank you," she said simply, "for not giving up on me, even when I was horrible to you. That's what dads do," I told her, kissing her forehead. "We never give up on our daughters." She smiled and closed her eyes. "Love you, Dad. Love you too, kiddo. Always." I stood in her doorway for a moment, watching her drift off to sleep. My little girl who'd been through so much, who'd been targeted by a predator, but had found the strength to break free. We still had healing to do, both of us, but we were going to be okay, better than okay. We were going to thrive.